In this world, the supreme gods are very bored and have plenty of free time. Because of that, they created a brain game named Game of the Gods, where humans can challenge the gods and engage in battles of wit with them. One day, in the Ice Mountains, a girl woke up from her sleep after thousands of years. Researchers happened to find her and immediately contacted the Mystic Court or Arcane Court. The girl's name was Lilashia, a former goddess who descended to Earth. Lilashia announced to them that she wanted to know the greatest player of this era and meet that player face to face. Some time passed, and the Game of the Gods in the spiritual area, commonly known as the Elements, was underway and broadcasted in the city of Ruin, in the Sacrament area. The players, commonly referred to as apostles, challenged 3 gods simultaneously. Unfortunately, all the players lost, and the gods won the game they had created themselves. Faye Theophilus, the main male character, also witnessed the match. He had just returned from a long journey of 6 months in search of a very precious girl to him. Everyone knew how great Faye was in this Game of the Gods. Faye immediately returned to the Ruin branch of the Mystic Court to continue his duties. Of course, the other players looked admiringly towards Faye, who had returned from his journey. Then Miranda welcomed Faye's return, but Faye commented slightly to Miranda because the information about the girl Faye was looking for was completely wrong. Faye had found that girl, and she was not the one Faye had been searching for all this time. Miranda teased Faye's futile struggle a bit. Then Miranda wanted to talk to Faye about something while escorting him to the room on the 17th floor. Miranda explained that she intended to introduce Leshia to Faye. If Leshia's wish was to meet the greatest player of this era, Faye was the answer. It was uncertain why the former goddess descended to Earth in the form of a girl. But according to the Mystic Court, this former goddess was very different from the other gods. Upon investigation, in ancient times, the goddess was playing hide and seek with the players in the ocean. However, the goddess fell asleep, and as time passed, the earth began to enter an ice age. The goddess accidentally slept for about 3,000 years. By the way, this goddess was the incarnation of fire in the form of a dragon, and her power had diminished since becoming a former goddess. Even though she had become a former goddess, she was still a goddess. Miranda instructed Faye to be careful not to anger the goddess. If the goddess became angry, the city would vanish, and the earth would be scorched in an instant. So the main point was that Faye had to be the guardian of the goddess. The gods had begun to descend to Earth to create their own games in the spiritual area. Only Faye was the player who could fulfill the expectations of the Mystic Court. After Faye and Miranda arrived at the room of the goddess Leshia, Faye was lost in thought and surprised because Leshia's appearance resembled the girl Faye had been searching for all this time. Then Miranda told Leshia that Faye was the greatest player of this era. Faye had won 3 times in a row since his debut a year ago. Miranda's task was done, and she immediately returned to her office so as not to disturb their meeting. Faye was still lost in thought, and Leshia was confused by his reaction. When Faye wanted to introduce himself to Leshia, Leshia immediately invited him to play a simple card game. Then Leshia laid out many cards on the dining table. They would get to know each other through this game because Leshia had modified each card with biodata topics like name, birthplace, age, hobbies, etc. The rules of this card game were simple and resembled matching Uno or poker cards. However, what they matched were not numbers or colors, but the biodata topics written on each card. For example, if Leshia happened to pick 2 cards with the same birthplace written on them, Faye had to answer his birthplace, and vice versa. But if one of them couldn't find a pair for their card, the opponent didn't need to answer about the topic on that card. And they continued searching for cards with the same topic to match in each of their turns. Each biodata topic had to be answered honestly. When the game started and Leshia shuffled the cards, Faye stopped Leshia's action first. Faye wanted Leshia to reshuffle the cards because Leshia had previously arranged each card on the table to explain the rules of the game. Upon hearing that, Leshia was surprised because she suspected that Faye could remember the positions of the cards in a short time. It was even possible that Faye could see the arrangement of the shuffled cards that Leshia had just done. Well, Faye actually wanted this game to be played fairly, and it was his habit to remember the rules of any game. In Leshia's mind, she was interested in Faye because he played so cleanly like this. Then Leshia had an idea to make this game even more fun and fair for both of them. Leshia immediately flew the cards in a pattern of 2 circles. The trajectories and speeds of the cards spinning were different, so both of them had to remember certain patterns of the cards to be able to match the cards correctly. Then Leshia added one special rule. They only had 1 turn even if one of them could match the cards correctly.
じゃあゲームスタート 望むところです。
さあ、始まるわね。
While the card game was ongoing, Leshia accidentally revealed her assets to Faye on the table. Of course, Faye saw it, and he asked Leshia to hide it first. Faye became unfocused and embarrassed. Leshia said that she didn't understand how to dress like a girl, so she only wore a regular tank top bra without wearing underwear anymore. Then the game continued after Leshia corrected her way of dressing and sat on the sofa. While their game was ongoing, I will explain some additional information that can help you understand this anime story in many future episodes. So, there are 7 rules that the gods give to fulfill the game's requirements. The first rule: humans who are blessed with the power arise by the gods will become apostles who have the right to play and challenge the gods. Second, anyone who has the power arise can be categorized as a superhuman or a human with magical abilities. Third, the gods game always takes place within the elements, a superior spiritual realm. Fourth, the power arise can only be used within the elements. Fifth, as a prize, the winner of the gods games will be given the power to realize and use some of the power arise in the real world. If the players have many victories, their power will also increase. Sixth, apostles who lose 3 times in the game will be disqualified and will not participate in the gods game anymore. Lastly, if apostles have achieved 10 victories, they will be considered to have completed the gods games and will be given a celebration. The celebration mentioned in the rule is very vague in meaning because the gods will determine it themselves. But unfortunately, there hasn't been any player who could complete the gods games to use the power arise in the real world. The power arise is very useful for humans to explore areas that have not been explored. 93% of the Earth is unsuitable for human habitation. That's why Faye is the only player expected to complete the gods games. Some time passed. Faye realized that this game wasn't about who wins or loses. It was just a game to dig as deep as possible for information. And there must be cards whose function is to trap players like jokers. Faye would aim for those cards to find out more about Leshia. But unfortunately, Leshia happened to get 2 blank cards, which meant it was Leshia's chance to ask anything to Faye. Then Leshia asked with a deep tone, what was the actual plan of humans to dare to serve and approach a goddess like Leshia? Faye trembled slightly because the girl in front of him emitted a very powerful aura. Then Faye answered honestly that he was assigned to supervise Leshia. Faye had to ensure the purpose and background of Leshia. After hearing that, Leshia smiled and said that she was increasingly interested in Faye. Not only did he play seriously, but Faye could also confront a goddess like her in the real world. Then Leshia decided not to use formal language to Faye, and vice versa. Leshia understood that Faye was a human she could trust, and Faye's style of play could meet Leshia's expectations. Moreover, Leshia understood that Faye was not aiming for victory in this game from the beginning. He only focused on the information he didn't know about Leshia. Then Leshia asked Faye one more question. What would you ask when you got those blank papers? Faye revealed that he was curious why Leshia didn't return to the elements and stayed on Earth. Then, why was Leshia interested in Faye among so many players who had higher ranks than Faye? Leshia answered that it was because Faye was the only rookie who had won 3 times in a row since his debut the previous year. So, Leshia's main goal was to find a partner to conquer the gods game together. Actually, Leshia just wanted to have fun playing games with humans. However, when Leshia tried to move back to Earth, she couldn't return to the elements. This transfer was only one way, and therefore Leshia couldn't become a goddess again. But that didn't matter to Leshia because she was determined to win the gods game to become a goddess again. After hearing that, Faye suspected that Leshia also knew about the meaning of the celebration and the rules of the gods game. Leshia explained that the rumors circulating among the players were true. Anyone who managed to win 10 games, one of their requests would be granted by the gods. Not just one request, but 100 or even 1,000 requests. But unfortunately, no human had been able to complete the gods game. From here, Leshia decided to stay with Faye to continue pursuing that celebration.
っておいねえ
私はずっと君みたいな人間を待ってたんだから。
何する気？
神々のゲームの始まりよ。
Faye and Leshia arrived at Elements to join the group that would challenge the gods. Of course, Faye's seniors were surprised to see him today. Moreover, they were also surprised because Faye brought Leshia to Elements. Faye explained that he was forced here by Leshia even though Faye had just arrived at Mystic Court today. Leshia also informed them that she and Faye would participate in this god's game. The seniors didn't need to worry because Leshia was on the human side. Shortly after, Mipu, the servant of the Titan god, welcomed the players and would explain the Titan god's game this time. Of course, the god's game was broadcast live in various cities. The players participating in this Titan god's game amounted to 18 people, and they had read previous data that the Titan god would definitely hold a battle-themed game. In the last 30 years, there have been 23 battle-themed games, and humans had a 14% chance of winning. But unfortunately, Mipu said that the Titan god would not hold a battle-themed game this time. The Titan god was tired of that theme and would hold a chase game this time. Therefore, the elements area here was in the form of a city with many tall buildings. The players had to escape from the Titan god's pursuit around the buildings there. However, there was a yellow light boundary where the players were not allowed to run beyond it. The players had to play within the square-shaped field area. The players would be declared losers if the Titan god managed to catch all of them. But there were some other conditions for defeat that Mipu couldn't disclose, including the conditions for victory. There was even a possibility that the players would be declared losers if they kept running away. The players had 5 minutes to escape, and after that, the Titan god would chase the players. Initially, the players were still thinking about the game, but the Titan god was already in front of them and destroyed one of the buildings there. The Titan god was eager to play with them. The players began to use their Arise powers to avoid the rubble of the building destroyed by the Titan god. But Faye did not. He just avoided using his physical strength. Leshia asked Faye, "Why aren't you using your Arise powers?" Faye replied briefly that his Arise powers would not let him die. Shortly after, there was a big collapse that would crush Leshia, and Faye wanted to help her.
Nani?
さすが元神様
It seemed that Faye forgot that Leshia was a former goddess. Then Leshia teased Faye a bit because Faye seemed to be concerned about the safety of a goddess.
フェイってば意外と可愛いとこあるんだね。
Some time passed, Faye, Leshia, and the other players managed to escape for a while. The men deliberately carried the girls, except Leshia, so that they could escape as far as possible to strategize first. But unfortunately, the Titan god could also run fast and was right behind the players. Therefore, the players decided to scatter and hide behind the buildings. Although this was a chase game, it looked like playing hide and seek. One of the seniors named Asta had the idea to hide inside the building. Perhaps this way, the players could win, and Asta immediately crossed over to enter through the building's entrance. Faye shouted to stop Asta because this was a bad idea. Shortly after, the moment was seized by the Titan god to step on Asta. But strangely, Asta did not experience a game over, and she could still continue the game with half of her body turning red. Then Asta used her Arise power, directed towards Faye and the others.
勝手に魔法が逃げてください。
風の魔法こっちに連発しながら言うセリフか。
違うんです。魔法が勝手に出ちゃうんですってば。
しまった。
何よこれ。
そんな。
私たち触られてないのに。
本当に神ごっこってわけか
Faye and the other players finally realized that there were hidden rules behind this game. If a player was hit by the god's attack, that player would become the god's slave and could attack other players. Faye and Leshia suspected that the effect of being the god's slave could spread to other players who had been touched or attacked by the god's slave. At this moment, there were 14 players left who would escape from the Titan god's pursuit and 4 of his slaves. Faye and Leshia decided to separate from the other players, and they also had to avoid Asta who was targeting them. The Titan god would target other players first who were easier to turn into slaves. Now, Faye and Leshia slightly understood the Titan god's plan. The Titan god wanted to attack them using his slaves at the end of the game. By the way, this was a strange moment for Asta because her body moved on its own even though she was consciously chasing Faye and Leshia. While fleeing, Faye discussed with Leshia that in this game, there must be other hidden rules. The half-red color on Asta's upper body provided a clue. If the players were game over, they should automatically return to Earth. Then Faye and Leshia decided to try something that might reveal the hidden rule. They immediately lured Asta into an alley, and the experiment began. It turned out their experiment succeeded. That meant if the players who successfully touched the bottom part of the god's slave's body, that god's slave would return to the human side. After knowing this, the Titan god was slightly annoyed because Faye and Leshia managed to reveal that hidden rule. The Titan God's plan was slightly messed up because of them, and he immediately changed his plan. Meanwhile, Faye instructed Asta to keep hiding around Faye and Leshia. Faye and Leshia ran again to evade the pursuit of the Titan God. They also discussed how to win this game. Faye thought that time kept ticking and the players wouldn't know when this game would stop. In fact, Faye didn't know how long the players could endure running like this. It seemed Leshia always looked at Faye, who was pondering ways to win. Leshia honestly said that Faye was a player who could understand what Leshia wanted to express. Moreover, Leshia always watched Faye playing with strong determination. She felt glad because there was a human like Faye who took playing God's games seriously. Thus, the gods could also enjoy the game they created themselves. Games are made for fun. After hearing the last sentence said by Leshia, Faye was reminded of the same words as the girl who used to play with him. Shortly after, they met the other players who had already become slaves of the Titan God. The players apologized because they couldn't be relied on by Faye, but at least Faye and Leshia should avoid them as much as possible. Well, despite the players' hope like that, their bodies still moved on their own to target Faye and Leshia.
足が勝手に動いてしまうのだ。
料理条件は何だ。ここまでにヒントはあったはずなんだ。
Faye and Leshia discussed again because their current position was very disadvantageous, like mice hiding from the pursuit of snakes. While they discuss, Asta remains hidden according to Faye's previous orders, but she couldn't keep hiding like this forever either. Faye understood that the game area must have been memorized by the Titan God. However, there must be clues leading to how to win this game. After Faye and Leshia thought for a while, they finally understood that there was another hidden game there. From the beginning, they had only played chase until they found out that there was a game of taking over the enemy. If the Titan God took over all the players to win, it meant the players could also win the game the same way, by taking over all the god's slaves. Faye and Leshia had played such a game before, so they would execute the plan with Asta's sudden help later. When they were about to leave the building, the god's slaves blocked their way, and Leshia immediately went out through the window to lure them out from there. Meanwhile, Faye deliberately ran up the building. The Titan God continued his plan while destroying the buildings there. According to Faye, he had started to understand what game the Titan God was playing. The Titan God deliberately destroyed the buildings there, and there must be a reason behind his actions. Therefore, Faye would confront him directly. Some time passed. The Titan God had destroyed all the buildings and faced Faye directly in the last intact building. The Titan God immediately struck Faye and rejoiced because victory was in front of him. At the same time, Leshia tried to run as fast as possible to lure the god's slaves to where Asta was hiding. She fully trusted Faye's decision. After arriving at Asta's hiding place, Leshia instructed her to attack all the players brought by Leshia. Then Leshia immediately touched the lower part of one of the god's slaves' bodies to return them to the human side. Of course, the god's slaves who had been attacked by Asta returned to the human side. This was the same as what the Titan God did at the beginning of this game. When the Titan God was having fun, suddenly Faye seemed unaffected by the god's slave effect. Faye explained that his Arise power was May Your God. With this power, Faye couldn't be controlled by his enemies, couldn't be attacked by anyone, including the gods, and could erase all wounds on his body to regenerate like before. Faye also explained that he already knew how to win this game. After seeing the Titan God's reaction, Faye thought that the 16 slaves of the gods had already become a victory for the Titan God. He even willingly destroyed the buildings quickly. That meant the actual game held by the Titan God was a Reversi-like game. Reversi is a board game using black and white pieces. The square-shaped area there was the Reversi board, where the fake chase game occurred. But there were moments when the players and the god could take over each other, and this was similar to Reversi pieces. Then the Titan God's destruction of the buildings there also became part of the game. In the Reversi game, if all areas were filled with pieces, the game ended, and the color with the most pieces won. While in the Titan God's game, if all the buildings were destroyed, the game ended, and the side with the most god slaves or humans won. The Titan God deliberately made Faye his last target because he saw Faye running up one building. But unfortunately, the Titan God's plan failed. The last building was destroyed, and the winner of this god's game was Faye and his friends, and the game that lasted for 3 hours ended.
人10神9で俺たちの勝ちだ。反論は
Miranda was happy because Faye could bring victory again from Mystic Court. It had been 35 days since the last human victory, and Faye's victory today became the favorite show for the inhabitants throughout the city. Miranda also asked for Faye's opinion about Leshia. Faye explained that he was very impressed with Leshia because she could match Faye's way of playing. Moreover, there were moments when they could understand each other just through eye contact. After hearing that, Miranda explained that Leshia was a perfect partner for Faye because they were very similar. Before Faye returned from his long journey, Leshia spent more time playing alone. Although there were other players who played simple games with her, Leshia could still win any game she played. Therefore, she didn't have a partner or opponent of her caliber other than Faye. Then Miranda also appointed Faye and Leshia as an official team because they shared the same feelings. Miranda also gave Leshia's room key to Faye. Then Faye entered Leshia's room and saw Leshia reviewing the Titan Gods game. It turned out Leshia had watched the replay 4 times, which was a lot for a 3-hour video duration. Then Leshia asked curiously to Faye what was his request when he succeeded in completing the Gods game. Faye explained that he was looking for the girl who used to be with him before. That girl was always playing with Faye when Faye was still young. They played all kinds of games together, but unfortunately, Faye didn't ask for the girl's name and just called her sis. Even Faye didn't know the girl's preferences and didn't remember her voice or face. Faye was a lonely boy who didn't have playmates since he was young, and that girl taught Faye many games. But Faye never won against that girl. Nevertheless, they always smiled and enjoyed the various games they played. But one day, the girl suddenly disappeared and promised Faye that she would meet Faye again. Faye's request was that he wanted to meet that girl and thank her. Faye's victories so far were also thanks to that girl. Then Faye revealed one thing to Leshia, that the girl Faye was looking for had the same hair color as Leshia's, vermilion. Faye even thought that girl had a connection with Leshia. After hearing that, Leshia laughed because she had been asleep for 3,000 years, and Leshia considered Faye's request unique. Nevertheless, Leshia still supported Faye's request and hoped that they both could become a worthy team to complete this God's game.
お姉ちゃんとそっくりの霊視に会えたのは運命かもしれない。
お姉ちゃん
海の遊び完全攻略を目指して